The morning Ryan Caldwell walked into the Grand Meridian Hotel kitchen. He was carrying two things: a lunchbox shaped like a cartoon bear, and the weight of raising a child completely alone. He had packed the lunchbox himself at 5 in the morning, the same way he did every single day, a small sandwich cut into the shape of a heart because his 6-year-old daughter Emma had once said that heart-shaped food tasted better. He didn't argue with that logic. He believed her. He believed everything she said because Emma was the only person left in his world who had never lied to him. Ryan had been a chef for 11 years. Before Emma came into his life, before his wife Sarah walked out of it, he had been a rising star in the culinary world, someone the food critics call a quiet genius with a pan. He had trained in Lyon, France, under a Michelin-starred chef named Bernard Lacroix, who once told him that a great chef doesn't just feed the stomach, he feeds the soul. Ryan had carried that idea with him like a torch into every kitchen he ever worked in. But that torch had been slowly dimming under the weight of everything else: the custody papers, the empty apartment, the school pickups, the parent-teacher meetings he attended alone while other fathers came with wives on their arms. He had been working at the Grand Meridian for 3 years. It was one of the most prestigious hotels in the city, a place where senators and celebrities and old money families came to celebrate milestones that cost more than most people's annual salaries. The kitchen ran with military precision under the command of executive chef and general manager Harold Whitfield, a man who had never once been seen without a pressed suit, a perfectly knotted tie, and an expression that suggested he had personally invented the concept of standards. Harold Whitfield was the kind of man who measured success in Michelin stars and magazine covers and did not believe that personal struggles had any place inside a professional kitchen. Ryan had kept his personal life quiet. In 3 years, he had never brought up Emma in the kitchen. He had never asked for special hours, never called in sick because of a school play, never made his circumstances anyone else's problem. He had built a reputation in that kitchen as the most reliable, most precise, and most creative sous chef on the floor. He was the one who came in earliest and left latest. He was the one the younger cooks came to when they didn't understand a technique. He was the one Harold Whitfield had once, in a rare moment of public praise, referred to as the backbone of this kitchen. Ryan had been quietly, deeply proud of that. He had gone home that night and told Emma, and she had said, "Does that mean you hold everyone up, Daddy?" And he had said yes, and she had said, "That's the most important job." And he had believed her again. Everything that was about to happen began with a single phone call on a Tuesday. Ryan was in the middle of preparing a sauce, a beurre blanc that required his complete attention, when his phone buzzed in his pocket. He ignored it. It buzzed again and again. He handed the station to a junior cook for 60 seconds, stepped aside, and saw the name on the screen. Emma's school. His stomach dropped the way it always did when that name appeared, because the school only called during hours when Emma was supposed to be fine. He answered. The school nurse told him calmly that Emma had fallen during recess and hurt her wrist and was crying and asking for her dad. The nurse said it wasn't serious, probably not broken, but they needed a parent to come in and sign the paperwork and take her for an X-ray just to be certain. Ryan went back to his station, turned the heat down on the sauce, and went to find the shift supervisor to explain that he needed 2 hours. The shift supervisor, a man named Davis, told him that was fine, he'd cover the station. What neither of them anticipated was that Harold Whitfield would walk through the kitchen at that exact moment, see Ryan removing his apron, and ask in his loud, cutting voice what exactly was going on. Ryan explained. He kept his voice professional. He explained that his daughter had been hurt at school, that it was a possible wrist injury, that he had arranged coverage, that he would be back within 2 hours, and that everything on his station was under control. Harold Whitfield listened to all of this with his arms crossed and his jaw tight, and then he said something that Ryan would replay in his mind 1,000 times over the next 2 years. He said, "You have a child?" Ryan said yes. He said he was a single father. He said Emma was 6 years old. Harold Whitfield looked at him for a long moment and then said, in a voice that was almost quiet, but not quite quiet enough that the other cooks couldn't hear, "I did not hire a babysitter. I hired a chef. A man who changes diapers cannot run my kitchen." The kitchen went silent. The kind of silence that has weight to it. Ryan stood very still. He felt something cold move through him, starting in his chest and spreading outward into his arms and hands. He was 34 years old. He had spent 11 years building a career. He had worked through a divorce without missing a single shift. He had shown up on Christmas morning, on Emma's birthday, on the nights when Emma cried for her mother and he had to put her to sleep and then come in and cook for 400 guests with a smile on his face. He had done all of that without complaint. And now a man in a pressed suit was reducing all of it to a diaper joke. Harold Whitfield reached over and picked up Ryan's apron from the counter where he had just placed it. He held it for a moment like it was something he was evaluating, and then he dropped it on the floor. He said, "Clear your station, collect your things. I'll have HR send you the paperwork by end of day." Ryan picked up his apron from the floor. He picked it up slowly, folded it neatly, placed it on the counter and looked at Harold Whitfield for exactly 3 seconds. He did not say anything. He walked to the back, got his bag and his jacket and the cartoon bear lunchbox, and he walked out. In the car on the way to Emma's school, he sat at a red light and gripped the steering wheel so hard his knuckles went pale. Then the light turned green and he drove. Emma was sitting in the nurse's office with her wrist wrapped in a cold pack and her eyes still red from crying. When she saw Ryan walk through the door, her whole face changed. She said, "Daddy," and he sat down next to her and put his arms around her and told her everything was fine. The x-rays showed no fracture, just a sprain. They gave her a small support bandage and sent her home with a lollipop. On the drive home, Emma asked why he was home so early. He told her he had gotten the afternoon off. She said, "Lucky." And he said, "Yeah, lucky." He didn't tell her what had happened, not yet. He was 6. That night, after Emma was asleep, Ryan sat at the kitchen table with his laptop and a cup of coffee that had gone cold and started to think through the numbers. He had savings, 14 months of living expenses if they were careful. He had a car. He had a garage that he used mostly for storage. He had 11 years of culinary training. He had his hands. And he had, pinned to the refrigerator by a small magnetic strawberry, a drawing Emma had made 3 months ago of a restaurant, a happy building with yellow windows, and flowers in boxes under each window and a sign above the door that said Daddy's Place in uneven crayon letters. He had thought it was cute when she drew it. He had taken a photo of it on his phone. Now he stood up, walked to the refrigerator and looked at that drawing for a long time. He did not sleep all that night. But by morning he had a plan. The plan was simple in the way that only plans made by exhausted people at 2 in the morning. The morning are simple, which is to say it was not simple at all, but it felt clear. He would start cooking from the garage. He would clear the space, install a commercial-grade setup as cheaply as he could manage by buying used equipment, get his food handler's license updated, and start selling home-cooked meals online. He had seen other people do it during the pandemic years. He knew the apps. He knew how to photograph food. He knew how to make people's mouths water with a single image. What he didn't know was whether anyone in this city would pay for meals made in a garage by a man nobody had ever heard of. But he had 14 months to find out. The first 2 weeks were harder than he had expected them to be hard. Clearing the garage took a full weekend. Buying the used equipment, a 6-burner range, a commercial refrigerator, a prep table cost him more than he had budgeted. The used range had a faulty igniter on the 3rd burner that took him 4 days, and 3 YouTube videos to fix himself. He had to rewire part of the electrical setup with the help of a neighbor named Gus, who was a retired electrician and who charged him nothing and asked only that Ryan cook him dinner once a week. Ryan agreed immediately, and Gus became, without either of them formally deciding it, something close to a friend. Emma, meanwhile, had decided that the garage kitchen was the greatest thing that had ever happened in the history of their family. She appointed herself official taste tester, a position she took extremely seriously. She would sit on a stool at the end of the prep table with a small fork and evaluate each dish with the gravity of a judge. Her reviews were a mix of brilliant and absurd. She once told Ryan that his duck confit was too smart for its own good, and another time declared his butternut squash beef the best soup in the world except for the color, which is a little too orange. He wrote every one of her notes down in a small notebook. Some of them were actually useful. More of them made him laugh when nothing else could. He launched his online ordering page on a Saturday morning with 12 menu items and photographs he had taken himself using natural light and a borrowed camera. He had written the menu descriptions carefully, not flowery or pretentious, just honest and specific in the way that good food writing should be. He had priced everything 10% below what he knew the food was worth because he was new and he understood that trust is earned one order at a time. By Sunday evening, he had received 6 orders. By the following Saturday, he had received 41. By the end of the first month, he had a waiting list. The word that spread was not just about the food, though the food was extraordinary. It was about something else, the story that customers began to tell each other, organically, without Ryan's prompting. A single father cooking restaurant-quality meals in his garage. A man who packed a heart-shaped sandwich in his daughter's lunchbox every morning and then went and cooked food that made you close your eyes on the first bite. People shared his menu page the way people share things when they feel like they've discovered something that deserves more attention than it's getting. And Ryan, who had never posted a single thing on social media in his life, found himself being talked about by people he had never met. But success in those early months was not a straight line. It was a series of hills and sudden drops, and the drops came fast and hard. The first real crisis arrived in the form of a supplier named Marcus Webb, a man Ryan had contracted with to provide weekly deliveries of premium produce. Marcus Webb had come with good references and a friendly handshake and a price that was fair. He had been reliable for the first 6 weeks. Then, without warning, he called Ryan on a Thursday afternoon the day before Ryan's biggest delivery week, the week he had taken on 30x'd raw orders and told him he wouldn't be delivering. He said he had a better contract with a restaurant chain and couldn't justify the smaller individual accounts anymore. He said he was sorry. He did not sound sorry. Ryan spent the next 9 hours on the phone and in his car visiting every wholesale produce supplier in a 40-mile radius. Most of them couldn't do short notice orders of that size. 2 of them could, but at prices that would eat his entire margin for the week. He eventually found a small family-owned farm 40 minutes outside the city, the Okafor family, who ran a mixed vegetable and herb operation, who agreed to an emergency supply at a price that was fair. He drove out there in person, shook hands with a woman named Patricia Okafor, who had strong hands and a direct gaze, and loaded his car with produce himself. He delivered every single order that weekend, 2 hours behind schedule. He sent a personal message to each customer explaining the delay and offering a 10% discount on their next order. Every single customer reordered. The Okafor farm became his primary produce supplier from that point forward. Patricia Okafor and her husband eventually became 2 of his most important relationships in the years ahead. But he didn't know that yet. He just knew that one person's betrayal had led him accidentally to something better. He started to notice that this kept happening, that every obstacle, when he got through it, had left him with something he didn't have before. He wasn't sure if this was luck or pattern. He kept going regardless. The bank came next. Ryan had reached the point 4 months in where the garage was at the limit of what it could do. He was turning away orders every week. He was working 16-hour days and had hired a single part-time assistant, a culinary student named Felix, who was quiet and fast and who learned everything Ryan showed him in half the time Ryan expected. But the space wasn't expandable. He needed a real kitchen. He needed a location, a small one, a modest one, something with a dining room that seated maybe 30 people to start. He had done the math. He needed a business loan of $80,000. He went to 3 banks. The first bank told him that without 2 years of audited business financials, they couldn't consider his application. He had 7 months of records. The loan officer was not unkind about it. She was simply doing her job, but the word no landed in his chest like a stone. The second bank sent him to a small business advisor who spent 40 minutes with him and then told him gently that his personal credit score, which had taken a hit during his divorce, was below the threshold required for an unsecured business loan. He asked about a secured loan. They said he'd need collateral. He had the car and some equipment and very little else. It wasn't enough. The third bank was the worst, because the loan officer at the third bank was a man who seemed to decide, within the first 3 minutes of their meeting, that Ryan was not worth taking seriously. He kept interrupting Ryan's presentation of his financials. He asked twice whether Ryan had any other income coming in a tone that suggested he found the entire premise doubtful. When Ryan showed him the monthly revenue numbers, which were not small, which showed clear growth month over month, the man glanced at them and said, "Home cooking operations tend to plateau." Ryan asked him what evidence he had for that. The man looked surprised to be challenged. Ryan thanked him for his time and left. He sat in the parking lot of the third bank for a few minutes. Then he called Felix and asked him to please make sure the evening orders went out on time. Then he drove to Emma's school for pickup. Emma knew something was wrong before he said a word. She was perceptive the way that children who have experienced loss early tend to become perceptive, attuned to the emotional weather of the people they love. She said, "Did something bad happen?" He said, "A few things didn't work out the way I hoped." She thought about this while buckling her seatbelt and then said, "Maybe they didn't work out because something better is coming." He looked at her in the rearview mirror. She was 6 years old and she said things like that. He started the car. The something better she had predicted arrived from an unexpected direction, not a bank, but a person. A woman named Claudia Reyes had been one of Ryan's earliest regular customers. She was a food blogger with a following of about 200,000 people and a reputation for writing about small, independent culinary operations before anyone else discovered them. She had been ordering from Ryan's garage kitchen for 3 months, and she had written a piece about him, a long piece, a personal piece. With photographs, she had taken herself of the food and the garage, and Emma sitting on her stool with her small fork raised in judgment. That tea had been shared widely enough that Ryan's order volume had briefly tripled in a single week. He had reached out to thank her. They had exchanged a handful of professional messages. He liked her. She was direct and clear, and she cared about food in the way that people care about things they believe in. When Claudia reached out in the 5th month to say she had a meeting she thought Ryan should attend, he wasn't sure what to expect. The meeting was with a man named George Tanaka, a semi-retired restaurateur who had spent 30 years building and selling independent restaurants and who was now, by his own description, a person with too much money and too much taste who likes to back the right people. He was 63 years old, small and neat and precise, and he had read Claudia's article 3 times and eaten Ryan's food 4 times through a proxy before agreeing to a meeting. George Tanaka asked Ryan 3 questions in the first 10 minutes. He asked why he had become a chef. He asked why he had left the Grand Meridian. And he asked what he wanted to build. Ryan answered all 3 honestly. When he answered the 3rd question, he pulled out his phone and showed George the photograph of Emma's crayon drawing Daddy's place in uneven letters, yellow windows, flowers, and boxes. George looked at it for a moment and then looked at Ryan and said, "How much do you need?" The conversation that followed was not about charity. George Tanaka did not believe in charity in business contexts. He believed in equity. He was willing to invest $120,000 for a 20% stake in whatever Ryan built, with the right to exit after 5 years at a valuation to be determined by an independent appraiser. He wanted quarterly financial reports and 1 dinner a month where he could bring clients. He wanted no say in the menu, the hiring, or the aesthetic of the space. He wanted to be a financial partner, not a creative one. Ryan shook his hand before the sentence was finished. He found the space 6 weeks later. It was a former dry cleaner shop on the east side of the city, a neighborhood that was not yet fashionable but was beginning to be. The kind of neighborhood where you could still afford the rent, but where people with good taste were starting to move in. The space was narrow and deep, with high ceilings and original brick walls, and large windows at the front that let in long shafts of afternoon light. Ryan stood in it alone on the day of his first visit and turned in a slow circle and felt something he hadn't felt in a long time: possibility. The renovation took 11 weeks. It took 11 weeks because Ryan was involved in every decision and because he refused to cut corners on anything that would be visible to the people who came to eat. He chose the tables himself, dark walnut, simple and warm. He chose the chairs low-backed, comfortable, not precious. He designed the kitchen layout with Felix's input and George Tanaka's contractor, and installed every piece of equipment himself alongside the contractor's crew, learning things about plumbing and ventilation that he had never needed to know before. He chose lighting that was warm and directional, the kind of lighting that makes food look the way it tastes when it's done right. He painted the walls himself on 3 consecutive Sundays while Emma sat in the empty dining room doing her homework. He had not yet named the restaurant. He had been thinking about it for months and had rejected everything that came to him too clever, too generic, too much. One evening, Emma looked up from her homework at the bare wall above the bar area where the restaurant name was going to go and said, "Are you going to put my drawing up there?" He laughed. She said, "I'm serious." He looked at the wall. He looked at Emma. He said, "What was the name on the drawing?" She said, "Daddy's Place. But maybe you spell it with an apostrophe now that you're fancy." The sign above the door when the restaurant opened read, "Daddy's Place." He spent 3 weeks on the menu. He wanted it to be ambitious without being inaccessible. personal without being self-indulgent, rooted in classical technique but alive with his own voice. He wrote it and rewrote it a dozen times. He cooked every dish on the menu for George Tanaka, for Claudia Reyes, for Patricia Okafor, for Gus the electrician, for Felix, and for Emma, who was the most honest critic of the group and who vetoed 2 dishes outright. One of the vetoed dishes was a beet tartare that she described as beautiful but sad. He disagreed but took it off anyway. He was the chef and she was 6 years old, and somehow she was still usually right. Opening night was a Tuesday in October, a quiet night, a soft opening, only 40 covers. Ryan had invited people he knew and people who had been loyal early customers. The dining room was full. The kitchen ran clean. Felix, who by now had 2 additional part-time cooks working under him, managed his station with a steadiness that made Ryan proud in the way a teacher is proud when a student surpasses expectations. The food went out on time and at the right temperature and looked the way Ryan had seen it looking in his head for 2 years. Several people cried. One of them was Gus. One of them, when Ryan came out at the end of service to say thank you to the room, was Ryan himself, briefly, privately, facing the kitchen wall for 30 seconds before he turned around. Emma was at the VIP table, a small 2-top near the front window that Ryan had designated as permanently reserved. She wore a blue dress with small white stars on it that she had chosen herself, and which was not entirely appropriate for a restaurant of this caliber, but which was perfect in every way that mattered. She ate 2 full courses and pronounced the dessert excellent and also emotionally complex, a phrase she had clearly borrowed from somewhere and was deploying for the first time.
Raya.
N came to her table between courses, crouching down to be at her eye level. She said, "You did it, Daddy." He said, "We did it." She thought about this and nodded. She said, "Yeah, we did it." The reviews came in the following weeks, and they were not just good, they were the kind of reviews that changed things. Claudia Reyes wrote the first one, of course, and it was generous and specific and true. But the review that landed hardest was from a food critic named Daniel Marsh, who wrote for the city's most widely read dining publication and who was known for being slow to praise and precise in his language. His review of Daddy's Place was titled simply "A New Standard," and it described the cooking's technically immaculate but emotionally alive in a way that fine dining in this city has been missing for years. He gave it 4 stars out of 4. He had never given 4 stars to a restaurant in its first month of operation. He had only done it twice before in his career. The waiting list. Tea for a table at Daddy's Place hit 3 weeks within the first month. It hit 6 weeks by month 3. Ryan hired more staff, trained them carefully, paid them above market rate, and told them on their first day that the most important thing in that kitchen was not technique. Technique could be taught, but respect. He told them that every person who came through the door deserved to feel that someone had thought about them. He told them that the food was a conversation, not a performance. Several of the staff he hired over the first year told him later that they had stayed not because of the salary, but because of that first conversation. He expanded the team slowly, always carefully. He brought in a pastry chef named Amara who had trained in Paris and whose desserts were so delicate they seemed to exist at the edge of something. He promoted Felix to sous chef, a decision Felix accepted with the quiet dignity of someone who had been waiting for it but would never have asked. He hired a front-of-house manager named Patrick who had spent 15 years in fine dining and who understood that service at the level Ryan wanted was not about formality but about making people feel, without their quite knowing why, that they were exactly where they were supposed to be. All of this took time. 2 years to be precise. 2 years from the day Harold Whitfield dropped Ryan's apron on the floor. And then one evening in October, the restaurant's 2-year anniversary month. A coincidence Ryan noticed but did not remark upon. A reservation came in under the name Whitfield Party of 2 for a Thursday evening. Ryan's front-of-house manager brought the reservation to his attention because a guest had apparently mentioned something about a potential partnership discussion. Ryan stood in the kitchen for a moment. He was 46 away from a full house that evening. He said, "Put them at table 12. Table 12 was a good table, good but not the best. Not the VIP table by the window. That one was already reserved, as always, for Emma." He was in the kitchen when Harold Whitfield walked in. He knew because Patrick had been told to let him know when the guest arrived, and Patrick sent a quiet signal. Ryan finished the plate he was working on. He handed it to the pass. He adjusted the front of his jacket, a crisp black chef's jacket, not a suit, because this was his kitchen, and he dressed the way he chose, and he walked out of the kitchen door into the dining room. Harold Whitfield was sitting at table 12. He was older than Ryan remembered, or maybe he had always looked that way and Ryan simply hadn't had the distance before to see it clearly. He was with a man Ryan didn't recognize, presumably a business associate. He was looking at the menu and seemed pleased by what he was reading. He had not looked up yet. Ryan walked toward table 12. He walked in the way that a person walks when they have spent 2 years building something from nothing, when they have learned things about themselves they didn't know they needed to learn, when they have watched their daughter grow into a person who calls their butternut squash bisque emotionally complex. He walked without hurry. Harold Whitfield looked up when Ryan was 3 steps away. He looked at Ryan's face, and Ryan watched the recognition move across Harold Whitfield's expression in slow, visible stages: the confusion first, then the retrieval, then the understanding, and then something that was not quite fear but was the nearest thing to it that a man like Harold Whitfield was probably capable of. Ryan stopped at the edge of the table. He stood in the warm light of his own dining room, in the restaurant his daughter had drawn in crayon on a refrigerator, in the place he had built with 11 years of cooking and one devastating Tuesday and 14 months of savings, and a lot of hours in a garage with a faulty igniter on the 3rd burner and a small girl with a fork. He looked at Harold Whitfield and he let the silence sit for a moment, not cruelly, not with malice, just with the fullness of what it contained. He said, "Good evening. Welcome to Daddy's Place. I'm Ryan Caldwell, the owner. I understand you wanted to discuss a partnership." Harold Whitfield opened his mouth. He closed it. He said Ryan's name as a question rather than a greeting. Ryan said yes. He pulled out the chair across from Harold Whitfield, not to sit down but to straighten it slightly the way a host does. He said the table would have a full tasting menu this evening, compliments of the kitchen, and that someone would be right over to take their drinks order. He said he hoped they would enjoy the meal. He did not say anything else. He turned and walked back toward the kitchen. At the far end of the dining room, at the small two-top by the front window, Emma was sitting in her blue dress with white stars, doing her homework with a glass of sparkling water at her elbow. She looked up as Ryan passed and gave him a small wave. He stopped beside her table, crouched down, and adjusted the small vase of flowers that sat at the center of it, one pale yellow tulip. Emma's choice changed every day. He said, "How's the homework?" She said, "Long, but I'm almost done." He said, "The duck is going to be excellent tonight. I want your notes." She said, "Obviously." He straightened up. He looked at the dining room, every table full, every candle lit, the sound of conversation and silverware in a room of people who had chosen to come here, to this place, because somewhere out there word had spread that the food was worth the wait and the room was worth being in. His room. His kitchen, his name above the door. He went back to cook. The partnership meeting, as it turned out, did not happen. Harold Whitfield's associate reached out the following week to inquire whether Ryan was open to a conversation about expanding the Daddy's Place concept under outside investment. Ryan's reply was polite, professional, and brief. He said he was happy with his current growth trajectory and his existing partnership structure. He thanked them for their interest. He wished them well. He did not say anything else. Gus, the electrician, who came for dinner every Tuesday and always sat at the bar where he could watch the kitchen, heard the story and laughed until he cried. Patricia Okafor, who had started coming to the restaurant every month with her husband, nodded with a satisfaction that required no further comment. George Tanaka, at his regular dinner, allowed himself a small smile. Felix, who had been there from nearly the beginning, said nothing and kept cooking. Emma heard the story on the drive home that night. She was 8 now, old enough to understand most of it. She listened carefully, the way she always listened to things that mattered. When Ryan finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "So he came into your restaurant and didn't even know it was." "Yes, yours?" Ryan said that was right. She said, "And you just let him sit there and eat your food?" Ryan said yes. She thought about this for a long time. Then she said, "That's kind of like the best revenge, but also kind of nice, because he got to eat really good food." She thought about it some more. Then she said, "I think that's the right way to do it." Ryan drove in silence for a moment. Then he said, "Yeah, I think you're right." She said, "I'm usually right." He said, "I know." The city would not stop talking about Daddy's Place for years. The stories people told about it changed slightly depending on who was telling them, but the core of it stayed the same. A man who had been pushed down had gotten back up and built something that couldn't be knocked over. Something that tasted like it had been made by someone who understood that cooking is not about impressing people. It's about feeding them. It's about saying, I thought about you. I made this for you. Come in, sit down. You are welcome here. Ryan Caldwell never forgot the morning he had walked in with the cartoon bear lunchbox. He never forgot the silence in the kitchen after the apron hit the floor. He never forgot the weight of those 3 weeks when the banks said no, one after another. And he drove home in the dark and listened to Emma's breathing through the baby monitor. He still kept on even though she was 6, and he knew she was fine, but he kept it anyway. He never forgot any of it. Not because it had broken him, but because it hadn't. Because he had taken it all and added it to the sauce slowly, like a good cook does, letting it reduce down to something concentrated and clear and true. And what it became in the end was the food. The food that made people close their eyes on the first bite. The food that a critic called technically immaculate but emotionally alive. The food that a 6-year-old girl with a small fork had been approving since before anyone else had the chance to taste it. Daddy's place. Every night, full house. Every morning, a heart-shaped sandwich in a lunchbox, packed by a man who believed his daughter when she said